Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a video on how to avoid cakey foundation. So I kind of want to start like a how-to foundation series where I show you how to avoid cakey face, how to get a more natural foundation look, how to get a more full coverage foundation look, how to get a long wearing foundation look. So I think what I'm going to do is maybe every month do one of these types of videos that has to do with foundation, educating you on how to get a certain type of finish or undertones, stuff like that, because I know a lot of you guys have requested videos like that. So today I'm going to start off with how to avoid cakey foundation. I'm going to give you my tips and tricks that I've learned in the past years and what really works for me. Also using some of my favorite products to really get that beautiful cake-free look, because I mean, let's be honest, I feel like we've all been there, done that at one point in our life. So I just want to help you guys avoid that as much as possible. If you want to continue watching, then please go ahead and do so. Okay, so the first thing you want to do to make sure that your makeup goes on very, very nicely is make sure that you moisturize. Moisturizing your skin is so essential, and I feel like, I know it sounds very like, duh, you're supposed to do that. A lot of people forget to moisturize. They're just like, whatever, and they slap the foundation on. You really give the skin the added hydration, and you allow there to be a nice, smooth, hydrating base so that the foundation can melt into the skin and not be laying on top and looking so like thick and crusty. So that being said, my favorite go-to is always the Ultra Repair Cream, because no matter what my skin's going through, this is always going to hydrate it enough for it to feel good and for it to really receive the hydration it needs without looking super luminous, dewy. I just apply this all over. Also making sure that if you feel like your skin is a little dry or you have a lot of dry patches, maybe the morning of, go ahead and exfoliate with a exfoliating scrub, an exfoliating mask. I like to use the Cetaphil exfoliator. It comes in like a squeeze tube, and I like to use it in the shower. I use it probably once or twice a week depending on how much makeup I wear that week. And I just go ahead, and it's very, very gentle, so it works great for rosacea skin. And then I go ahead and I feel like it really gets rid of any dryness that may be laying on top. We have the moisturizer on our skin. Now we're gonna go in with primer. So for primer, I'm going to go in the areas where my skin needs it, and I'm gonna be using two primers that I feel like really make a difference for the actual skin. Let's talk about this e.l.f. Poreless Putty Primer. This is like one of my favorites, especially if you want to have a very good, clean, pore-free canvas. I have enlarged pores right here, and I noticed that as my rosacea tends to get a little bit more texture-free, I can see my pores even more. Before, the texture was kind of covering the enlarged pores. Now I feel like they're more enhanced if I don't do something to kind of really make them just disappear for a minute. So I'm gonna be taking some of this, and what I like to do with this is I just like to put it in the back of my finger, and then I kind of warm it up with my fingers so that it doesn't go on straight and it doesn't look a little bit too thick. I feel like really warming up products with your fingers allows you to kind of really get into that creamy, lightweight base, so that when you go on your skin, it's not like this heavy consistency. Another good tip that I can give you guys is try to use light products. The moisturizer that I use by First Aid Beauty is very lightweight, so it really kind of sinks into my skin and it's not laying on top. I feel like the heavier products you use, the more likely it is that you will be getting a cakey finish. So I'm just gonna go ahead and apply it now that I feel like I've really gotten it to be a little bit smoother. And I'm just targeting that primer specifically in the areas where I have enlarged pores. I noticed that I used to make the mistake of, you know, I would get a primer like this and I'd be like, oh my God, it's gonna be to prime my whole face, and I would just apply it everywhere. And I didn't realize that with certain primers, like a pore minimizing primer, I don't need to apply it all over because I don't have enlarged pores everywhere on my face. So what I like to do now is kind of use different primers in different areas depending on what my skin needs. That also helps you avoid that cakier finish. So I'm just literally taking it exactly where my skin needs it, because that's where I want to give it a more perfected look, and I really want to make sure that it just looks really nice and smooth and pore free. So we're just going here, and I really like to drag it outwards and then kind of pat it. And the e.l.f. Poreless Putty Primer is a dupe for the Tatcha Silk Canvas. I did a review on it where I compared both of them, and it is a dupe. If anything, I feel like this one is a more lighter weight consistency. I feel like the Tatcha one is fantastic, but it tends to be a little bit thicker and it can crumble if you do have dry skin. So now I'm gonna be taking another favorite of mine. This is the L'Oreal Infallible Pro Matte Primer. This is one of my favorite primer. So because I do have oily skin, I do have to put into consideration that I'm going to need a product that's gonna kind of help minimize those oils. So I'm gonna be taking this one as well, warming it up with the back of my fingers. This one is very, very nice and creamy and very lightweight. So I'm just gonna be applying this right in the areas where I tend to get very oily. So these smile lines, they're just a must. Like, they get oily. And you really want to make sure that you really spread out the product very nice and evenly and just distribute it as much as possible so that when you put that foundation on, it's not like it's going straight on. I could also go with a pore minimizing primer on my nose, but I feel like my nose more so needs an oil-free primer because my nose gets pretty oily through the day. So I definitely want to make sure I get that in. But I would suggest that for the priming step, you use products that will really give you that beautiful skin effect, that beautiful like, whoa, her skin looks perfected, but it still looks like her natural skin, which is why I'm going in with these two products that are very lightweight, but also are very beneficial to what I'm trying to minimize on my face. Okay, so once we apply our primers, I would say give your face approximately 2 to 4 minutes to just really absorb the product that just went on the face. So the moisturizer, the primers, before you just start packing on more product. Because sometimes when you just go straight on, it tends to be like, whoa, I wasn't ready for that yet. And then you kind of have to like deal with it, maybe looking a little bit thicker on your skin. So I'm gonna give it that time. I'm just gonna sit around for a minute or two and then we can go ahead and start with the foundation so I can give you guys the tips that I like to do during the foundation process. So what I've noticed in the past, that one of the biggest things that tends to give people cake face, especially if you have texture. Like when I was not treating my rosacea and I just had texture and I didn't know what the hell it was, I thought that me adding more foundation or a fuller coverage foundation would make it look better. But when you have texture and you're using a super full coverage foundation, it's going to enhance that texture and it's going to make your makeup look way more cakey. So what I like to say is, if you have a lot of texture, go in with a lighter weight formula, not necessarily a lighter coverage, but just like a lightweight formula that's very nice and like creamy and not so thick, because when you go in with something super thick, when you have texture, it's not gonna end well. Today I'm gonna be using this one because I feel like this one gives you such a beautiful finish. No matter what skin type you have, the Face Tape really does it for me. So you guys are about to see this in action. Right now I'm in the shade 37N Medium Tan Neutral. And don't worry, I'm gonna have a video, one of my foundation series videos coming up where I will discuss colors, undertones, and all of that fun stuff. So expect that soon. But I just wanted to mention that because I mentioned the color of this. And you can see what the formula looks like. It's a little bit runny, but don't let that fool you. Don't let that scare you if you have oily skin and think, oh my God, it's gonna be super dewy and luminous. It's really not like that. What I go ahead and do is start off on this side right here now that we've had our primers on for a few minutes. And you can see it's just like a really smooth consistency. And it blends so easily. So what I like to use to avoid a cakey finish is always use a damp sponge. And I like to really press it into my skin. And if you prep it the right way, the foundation shouldn't be removing or slipping and sliding. It should grip into place when you apply everything. So that's why moisturizing and priming is so essential to a foundation look, because it really allows your skin to work beautifully with the foundation that you are applying it. So do you see this? Like, it looks so smooth, and it melts right into the skin. Yes, we do have a little bit of radiance right here, but overall, what we're going for, which is that non-cakey finish, is not there. The reason I like to use a sponge when I'm going for a non-cakey look is because a damp sponge can absorb any of that extra product. In case you may have a heavy hand and you get super happy when you pump foundation out, it's not going to allow it to like overdo it, you know? Because sometimes when you go in with a brush, I feel like I get a way fuller coverage finish. And I feel like with a sponge, I'm not getting that, but I'm also getting it to really blend into the skin and really go into the skin because you're pressing it into your skin. So it kind of allows it to really absorb with all the other products that you've put on your skin before. I also like to go in and apply dots of the foundation and then go in and blend it, because I find that when I go straight in with the sponge and put the product on the sponge, I feel like you're putting too much product on the skin. Usually what I like to do is start off with one pump. I also want you guys to know that less is more. So I used to have this thing where I would be like, oh my God, I need more, I need more, I need more. I don't use more foundation unless I need it. If my skin doesn't need more foundation, I'm not gonna keep packing it on, because like I mentioned, when you have texture and you're packing it and packing it on, the more likely it is that in those areas where you have the texture, where the little bumps are, it's going to look super cakey and it's gonna look like there's a lot of product stacked on top of those textures. Because you have to also remember that after you apply the foundation, you probably will be applying concealer, and usually concealer gives it a little tiny bit more of a fuller coverage finish. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I look at myself right now, compared to this side, there's a big difference. I think this is pretty much perfect for now, so let's move on to this side. Again, I'm gonna go ahead and pump. I'm gonna use that much. I also like this foundation because it's so lightweight in consistency, but it definitely is a great coverage. So if you do have rosacea, or you have scars, or you have something that you want to avoid, then it's good to have a foundation that is more fuller coverage but still very lightweight. I feel like a lot of brands have been doing this, where they come out with foundations that are full coverage but are just so lightweight in consistency, which I think is very smart, because I feel like nowadays people really are obsessed with that more skin-like effect as opposed to a really full coverage effect. I don't think you really need a super heavy, thick foundation unless you're gonna be like under like lights the whole day and you don't want it to budge and you want it to be like basically stuck there. But I feel like if you are somebody that just wants to have a nice full coverage finish, then I would really recommend a lighter weight consistency. Forehead I'm never too worried about, because the forehead is pretty evened out and it's also very smooth. So we don't have to worry too much about what it looks like. Okay, so now we're gonna put the foundation away because we are done with it. We don't need any more. So now the next step that I like to do is I kind of like to let the foundation really sink into my skin and just prepare for, you know, everything else that's gonna go on top. We do kind of have a little bit of a radiance peeking through, and that's okay as somebody that has oily skin, because we will go back in and kind of powder it a little bit. Not too much, because obviously we don't want to make it look really intense, but we do want to give it a little bit of a powder so that it really stays in place and doesn't look super oily through the day. Now, if you have dry skin, this is like everything to you and you're going to love this, because this is the type of finish you get. But I do want to do my concealer and my powder on camera, because that's kind of part of how to avoid the cakiness. So let's go ahead and hop right into our concealer. Okay, so I'm gonna mention two of my favorite concealers that I like to use to avoid that cakey look. The first one is a drugstore one, and this is the Milani Conceal and Perfect. I love this because it's so lightweight, but it's still very full coverage like the foundation. If you do have under eyes that are very dark, you definitely want that fuller coverage look, but you still want it to be very lightweight. I tend to find that a lot of women and men, the area where they get the most dry or they get the most kind of like fine line, can definitely accentuate them looking a little bit older in age, is the under eyes. So That's why I like to tend to find formulas that are very, very nice and smooth and a little bit more on the liquidy side, not so thick, because those thicker ones tend to really enhance the foundation. I also want to give you guys another tip, is that if you're using a foundation that's super thick in consistency, you want to use a concealer that's a little bit more liquidy. If you're using a foundation that's lighter in consistency, then you can get away with using a more full coverage, thick concealer, because you're not wearing something underneath that's so like heavy. If you're wearing a heavy concealer and a heavy foundation, chances are it's gonna look heavy down there, especially if you have to go in and bake the under eyes shortly after. So that's why I like to use these guys. I like to use Milani if I'm going for a drugstore. If I'm going for more high end, I am obsessed with the Laura Mercier. This one is one of my favorites. This is what I'm gonna use today, but I just love it. Today, I'm just gonna strictly be focusing on the under eye. I'm not gonna be doing too much of that big triangle form, because I just kind of wanna lock this direct under eye into place. Go in back and forth, and it really doesn't feel like I have anything under there. But as you can see, my under eye looks bright and it looks fully covered now. Do you see the difference? And I'm gonna be using my Airspun powder. I'm just gonna lock it into place, but I'm just directly gonna try to stick to just keeping it here so that I don't get too much powder underneath here. And we're gonna leave this on for approximately 1 to 2 minutes. When you are working with powders and you kind of want to bake them, you want to make sure that you don't leave them on for too long. If you leave them on for more than 5 minutes, you may get a little bit more of a like super intense finish. So that's why I really try to directly apply it right under the eye, and also not apply too much, because we don't need all that powder. So while that is doing its thing, we're gonna go ahead and go in here, and like I mentioned, we're just gonna stick in that under eye area. I have to say that a beauty sponge is your best friend when you want to do a more skin-like, cake-free finish. And then for the rest of the face, we're only going to be applying the powder in the areas where I get really oily, so pretty much the areas where we went ahead and primed. But I'm just going to be using a powder brush and kind of dusting some powder and then brushing it away, as opposed to really fully baking it, because like I mentioned, we don't want that super like stone matte feel. I'm gonna be taking a little bit of powder, like that much, going in right here, going in right here. And I'm not taking the powder in the areas where I'm going to be contouring or applying more products, because I don't want it to look like there's too many things laying on top. I'm just applying in the areas where I want to avoid the oils and where I know that I'm not applying any more products. So right here, a little bit on these corners. We're going to be applying a little bit of nose contour, so we want to leave the nose alone, but just specifically right in the smile lines is where we need it. Okay, so now we're going to dust this away, because we really do not want any cakiness. And you can see it looks super nice and smooth down there. And we can also kind of dust it into a little bit of the cheek, but not too much. So there's definitely things and ways that you can avoid that cakiness while still doing the steps that you would normally do, like baking, but kind of just minimizing the time that you would bake, minimizing how much product you put on. It makes the biggest difference. So now for this side, we're gonna go in as well, and we're just gonna dust that away, kind of take it a little bit into these areas. Another reason I love this foundation so much is because usually I can tell when something's super thick, because these lines up here will start to crease really badly immediately. And with this foundation, it doesn't do that whatsoever. So what I like to do is I like to use the Morphe Continuous Setting Mist. I don't necessarily use this as like my final setting spray. I kind of more so use this because I find that this Morphe setting spray really makes everything become one. So with this guy, I like to use it twice. And I know that may be a little bit excessive, but I like to use it right after I'm done applying my concealer, my bake, and my foundation, because I want everything to melt in together very nicely. And then I go ahead and apply it one more time when I come back, right before I apply my final setting spray. So for me, this isn't so much of a setting spray that I use to keep my foundation locked in. It's more so of a spray that I like to use, make my foundation mesh well with my skin, with everything that's laying on top. So we're gonna do a little bit of this, not too much because we just went ahead and added a little bit of powder. So that's about enough. And the cool thing about this one is that you really cannot feel it. It's such a fine mist that it almost feels like it's like a little fan going through your face. But I feel like it really makes a difference in kind of making everything sink in together for the next few minutes while I finish off the rest of the face. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish everything off, and then I'm gonna come back and set the face with this. You also use my current favorite setting spray and give you guys my final thoughts. Okay, so I finished my entire face of makeup. As you guys can see, I pretty much completed my full face, and I love how my skin looks. I feel like most importantly, it looks non-cakey, it looks fresh, it looks beautiful, but it still looks like my skin. And the cool thing about this is that even though I have oily skin, it doesn't look like I look dewy, oily, or any of the above. So I'm really impressed with that. So the last step I like to do is I like to do one more layer of this continuous setting mist, because now that I have blush on and bronzer and a little bit of highlight, I want to make sure that it all kind of becomes one with the rest of the products. So like I mentioned, I do like to do it twice just so that I can really get that skin-like effect. So we're gonna go in one more time, and we're just literally gonna do that much. It feels so fine that it doesn't even feel like there's anything going on your face, but just know that there is, so you don't get too carried away and heavy-handed. And the very last thing I like to do to make sure that my skin and foundation looks fantastic all day, as well as some added SPF in there, is my actual setting spray that I'm obsessed with. So this is the Seriously Fab Zinc It Over setting spray with sunscreen protection of 25 in here. This is the only sunscreen that does not irritate my skin. It's worked so well with me. Everything else has been way too irritating. I was actually recently trying a Supergoop one, and my skin literally broke out in hives. And I tried to like tough it out for 3 days, and like 3 days I had like all this itchiness, and it was like, no. So this is what I trust. It doesn't have those chemicals in there. It's fantastic. And I like this because it is sheer. So it's not one of those heavy setting sprays that like is on top of your skin and just messes everything up and makes it look like kind of dirty or kind of like luminous. It's just like the perfect setting spray in there. I do want to quickly say I do now have an affiliate code with them, because I truly believe in this setting spray, especially now moving into those hot months where you're going to need something that has that good SPF and you can consistently reapply. So Zinc It Over, I get this in the unscented, and you guys can get 10% off your order with the code TMB10 for the Mexican Beauty. And once we have all that stuff locked into place, we can go ahead and start our day. So that completes this video on how to avoid cake face foundation. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. I would love for you to become a member of family here on YouTube, because I wouldn't want you guys to miss all the fun that I have in store for you guys. Also, don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you never miss a video, because why would you want to miss a video? Also, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up. It lets me know to continue doing these types of videos, because I definitely want to keep moving forward with this foundation series for you guys, because I know you guys love foundation videos from me. So that being said, I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you guys very, very soon for a brand new video. Bye, guys.